Okay, what I'm going to talk to you about for this session is the PSG PDF API, which you may not have been aware of. I've blogged about it a couple of times, so if you do follow our blogs, you may have seen it there. I know a few people in the room have downloaded it, and I've had some great feedback from some of you as well, so thank you for that. I think it was done about last sort of August, September time this thing got introduced, so since the last conference. And basically, as its name suggests, it's a little API in the language that helps you generate and print and view and so on PDFs. So it's an OO API. As a backstory, there was some work done earlier, several years ago, in fact, by our development team, and they put something in the CodeExchange called PDF DBL. That's been out there for quite a long time. And what that is a wrapper for an open source PDF library called HaruPDF. And the PDF DBL essentially put a DBL API around it. But I was never quite happy with that. It's great, it does its thing, but it was never really particularly well documented. Neither is Haru, actually, to be honest. And there were some examples, but I felt that we could do a little bit better in terms of how the API fits together and in terms of improving usability. So what I did was put a wrapper around the wrapper. I might resolve that at some point and refactor it so that my stuff directly uses the Haru underlying library. I'm not sure at this point. I don't think there's a great need to do that. What the PSG API does, and both of these are still available in CodeExchange, so you can go either way. If you want the really low level stuff, PDF DBL is still out there, and I just sort of put a layer on top of that. Basically, my API is fully OO, and it's kind of a higher level abstraction. I think it's easier to learn, easier to use. I've fully documented it. There's a help file that comes along with it that shows you exactly what the concepts are, how to use it, how to go about it. Has example code in there. There is sample code that runs on VMS, on Unix, on Linux, on Windows, and in Synergy.net. And there are ways to build all of those things in the zip file that you download as well. So I'm hoping it's pretty easy to get up and running with. What I tried to do with the PDF API is make it really simple yet very flexible as well. There's a lot of reporting scenarios where existing report programs just do fixed pitch row and column based 24 by 80 or whatever it is type of just reports. So the API tried to make it really easy to do that kind of stuff. Creating PDFs is actually a pixel based operation. You draw pixels in certain locations. It uses an XY coordinate system based in the bottom left corner, so it's kind of reverse math all the time, and it gets a bit complicated, to be honest. And I felt that for a lot of cases we could do a much better job of making it really simple. So that's what I tried to do. So it does have some external dependencies. This thing still has HaruPDF at the bottom of the stack here. I do ship the Haru DLLs along with the zip file, so you don't need to go and pull multiple things from multiple places. I also ship the PDF DBL code within my zip file as well, so the whole thing is there. You just download it and unzip it. And that is important because my API doesn't do 100% of what Haru can do. PDF DBL wraps all of it, so if you find something that my API does not do, you can still drop down to the PDF DBL level and go at it directly that way as well. And the latest versions of Haru and PDF DBL are included with the SynPSG PDF download that you'll get from the CodeExchange. Optionally on Windows, also other things that you might need is you might need to obviously register a PDF viewer application. Clearly not clearly, but on Linux and on VMS, the API supports creating PDFs, but not necessarily launching a viewer. But clearly on Windows, you can launch Adobe Acrobat or what they call it these days, Adobe DC, or any other PDF viewer application to actually view the things. There is actually an open source PDF viewer called HaruPDF, which I also ship the installer for that with the zip file as well. So if you don't want to use Adobe or Acrobat for any reason, then there's a free one there that you can use. Actually, Sumatra, I struggled for a long time to figure out a way. You would think PDFs are easy things to print, but actually they're remarkably difficult to print from code. They're really easy to open in a viewer and have the user go file print, but if you actually want to just have an application print the PDF, there's no immediately obvious way of doing it. Sumatra, I found, was the answer to that. You can't even do it with Acrobat. It always pops up a piece of UI. Sumatra, if you install it, does give the API a way of doing background printing, so you can just literally print the PDF to a printer, and it does it via the Sumatra PDF. And that's all documented as well. Benefits of PDF, it's probably pretty clear. The P is for portable. So it's about as portable as it gets. It's a great way of creating print or report-based output these days and being able to distribute that through email, posting it to websites, document management systems, and so on. I'm sure I don't need to sing the benefits of PDF. PDF API use cases, certainly one use case is creating brand new output, listings, reports, charts, other kinds of output. But I've also tried to make it nice and easy to alter existing reporting apps. So I've sort of put some thought into, well, how do your existing typical print programs tend to work? And tried to put things together in such a way that you can literally swap out a few statements here and there and have your existing programs modified to output PDF output instead of what you might be doing already. So instead of maybe print API, or instead of even the more traditional type of reporting where you're maybe outputting a sequential file and then LP queuing it, that kind of thing. So I've done things in the API that you can literally swap out your write S to a sequential file with a similar statement that goes directly to the PDF. I've also built in a mechanism where if you do have existing programs that produce sequential output that then gets printed, there's also a mechanism in the PDF API to just essentially attach that text file and it reads it and loads the thing straight into a PDF. So there are some ways you can get up and running rather quickly with this thing. Getting started, read the documentation. I've spent a lot of time documenting it, both from a conceptual point of view and explaining how the API is designed to be used, and also kind of reference material. There's one main class that gets used as a class that you might guess called PDF file, and almost everything is just method calls and properties on that class. So you just create an instance of the PDF file class. It's in a namespace, synpsg.pdf. So you literally just take the source files, build them into an ELB. It is OO, so it does have to be prototyped. So if you don't have an existing prototyped ELB, probably the best solution is just create a new one and just put this stuff in it. But if you do have an existing prototyped ELB, just add the two source files into your build and off you go. It's pretty easy to get up and running with. Let's talk about concepts. In the actual PDF world, what really happens is everything's done through absolute positioning, and basically using an XY coordinate system, so 0, 0 being the bottom left corner, X coordinates being across the page, Y coordinates being up the page, and you identify the position of a line or or the bottom corner of a piece of text or a circle or a box or whatever it is by its XY coordinates and its width and its height and so on. The PDF API, the underlying Haru stuff, supports various page sizes that you can see listed there, all the common ones, letter being very common over here, A4 being very common in Europe and so on. And the API supports all of those things. And basically, when you're creating a new PDF file, you say, I want this page size and I want this default orientation for pages, portrait or landscape, although you can switch on a page-by-page basis as well. So positioning happens by XY coordinates. And the PDF system uses a sizing system that PDF calls device-independent pixels. And a device-independent pixel is 1/72 of an inch, basically. So essentially, you're working at a resolution of 72 dpi. That's important to know because obviously if you're trying to calculate and draw things with absolute positioning and drawing boxes and circles and graphics, that's the coordinate system you're going to work in. But like I say, if your requirements are fairly simple, that's complex because you have to calculate the bottom coordinate, Y coordinate for every row and how big is the font and calculate how many rows you can fit and all that kind of stuff. So what I've done is tried to give you a way of working a lot simpler than that if your requirements are simple, but without compromising functionality. You still get full unfettered access to the API to do advanced stuff as well. These are the supported page sizes again, just for reference material more than anything else. So by selecting the page size, clearly or the page type, so letter or A4 or whatever, what you're ultimately doing is defining what is the width and height of the page. Some of them are expressed in inches, some of them are expressed in centimeters or millimeters, depending on the type and where the standard name came from. And obviously that determines the width and height of the page in device-independent pixels. The XY coordinate system, like I've already mentioned, it gets complicated if your requirements are simple. If all you want to do is a tabular report type thing, using a fixed space font, which a lot of your existing print programs do, then, like I say, you constantly wind up calculating, well, what's the XY coordinate for the bottom corner, and how wide is this text in that font, and how high is it, and therefore where does the next row go, and all that kind of stuff. So it's very flexible, it's very powerful, it lets you put anything literally exactly where you want to put it on the page. But if your requirements are simple, then it takes a lot of time to do all that math and calculate it. So what I've also done is given you an alternate way of using the API, which is based on rows and columns. So it's possible with the API to express that when you create a document, you want a letter page in portrait mode, and you would like to have an available width of 80 columns or 90 or 120 or however many columns you want the report to be wide. And what it will do is it will divide the page up. It will basically load a default font. It uses the fixed pitch Courier font if you're working in this mode. And it will load that font, and it will figure out what is the biggest font size I can use to achieve that width that you've requested. So you can tell it that if you want it to be an exact match. So if you want to have exactly 80 columns available, and it will adjust the margins to the slight size of the page, so it'll get the biggest font it can, and then center it on the page and maybe adjust the margins a little bit. Or you can just say, I want at least 80, and it'll say, well, I can give you 84. That's the closest font size in steps, and it will come back and say, well, you asked for 80, you've actually got 84 available. So you can work whichever way you want. This mechanism also allows you to specify margins, top, bottom, left, and right. It defaults to a 0.16 inch margin, I think it is, which is about the natural margin that most laser and inkjet printers have as well. Or you can turn them off and have no margins at all. And you also can optionally say, well, I'd like to have 3 header rows and 2 footer rows and that kind of thing, so that you can put header and footer type information on each page as well. This doesn't actually do anything different in the API. It just gives you methods to say print on row 1, print on row 2, or write S type functionality. And it has the concept of a current cursor position like the screen does. So you can literally just write S, write S, write S, write S, and it will just go next row, next row, next row. And it will throw pages automatically if you just keep doing that and so on. So the simplest case, you can just open your file and start, the syntax isn't write S, I forget what it is now, but you could literally just say next line, next line, next line, and it will just create the multi-page document. So that's about the simplest use case. And doing this does not prevent the use of anything else. You can still do stuff in other fonts with exact positioning and draw graphics and boxes and colors and circles, as well as having row column access to the data as well, if that's what you want to do. So electing to work this way does not stop you doing anything else with the document. So using row and column coordinates, once you've specified, basically you drive it based off the width and what margins you want, if any, and how many headers and footers, and it will then calculate, like I say, it calculates the biggest font it can use to achieve that, and then it figures out how high that font is and calculates how many rows will fit, and then it subtracts any headers and footers and all of that kind of stuff. So it just kind of dynamically figures things out. And of course, when it's calculated internally, okay, at that font size that achieves the width, I can fit 64 rows. There's a property available to let you get to how big is the body so that you can control throwing pages and all that kind of stuff. And then there are various methods to let you output text. So the main way of outputting text is a method called draw text. That is a row column, an XY based mechanism, and then there's draw text RC, which is based on rows and columns. And that's a convention that sort of is propagated throughout the API. So there might be a draw image RC, row column based or pixel based. Simplest use case creating a PDF is literally basic steps are import the namespace. You don't have to, obviously. You can hard long code everything if you want to, or specify full paths if you want to. But generally, import the namespace in PSG.pdf, declare an object handle PDF of type PDF file, and then create a new instance of it. And as you can see, there are no mandatory parameters on the constructor. So if you just do a new PDF file like that, it defaults to letter, page size, and portrait format. And I think it defaults for row column mode to 80 columns wide, no headers, no footers, and 0.16 inch margins or something like that. The defaults are all documented. So really simple. There are also a bunch of optional parameters on the constructor, so you can tell it that you want a certain page size, you can tell it that you want to default to landscape orientation for each page, you can specify a minimum number of columns that you want, and that's what lets you say I want 132 column wide or whatever. You can constrain it to a maximum font size, because if you tell it you want 4 characters wide, it's going to pick a huge font. Okay, or if you, and so on. So you can tell it, well, don't go above a certain size. You know, figure out how many wide, but don't go above 24 point or whatever. Top, bottom, left and right margins, and so on. Number of header rows, number of footer rows. Where do you want the file to be located? I think it defaults to temp colon on Windows and sys$disk on VMS. There are default locations. You can pass it a partial file name so that you can, again, it has default rules for what the PDF will be called. Can't remember what they are, but they're all documented. But you can override that and pass it a file name and so on. Defaults to a white background color, but you can override that if you wish. And you can ask it to put extra spacing between rows in the row column mechanism as well. Oh, there's the defaults. I'm not going to linger on those, but they're documented. They're all in the documentation. So letter page size, portrait, white background, 80 columns centered, no headers, footers, and so on is the default. Once you've got a document, basically you just start calling methods on that document to do things. So the simplest case is drawing text. So there are two primary mechanisms for drawing text. There's draw text RC, which is based on row and column. And there is draw text, which is based on XY coordinates. And what you're specifying is the XY coordinate of the bottom left corner of the text. And as you can see, you can pass the text to draw in both cases. You can specify a color if you want. That's the foreground color to override. The default foreground color is black. You can also set the foreground color property to change the default. You know, all of these things you can do in multiple ways. If you pass new line as true, using the row column mechanism, it kind of throws a carriage return line feed and leaves the cursor ready for the next right S kind of operation. And you can do simple underlining of text as well. The underline is a little bit flaky right now. I need to do some work to improve that. There is no underline thing in PDF. You have to actually go and figure out where and draw a line underneath the text. So it's a little bit wonky right now. I'll try and improve that as time goes by. So drawing text is nice and easy. Working with colors, there's an enum that's defined that has 500 or 600, I believe, named colors. So you can really come up with some good-looking content. So PDF color dot, and of course you're going to get the IntelliSense in Workbench and even better in Visual Studio to let you help pick those colors. Defaults, as I've said, is no back or white, essentially. Black on white is essentially the default for text and boxes and circles and things like that. Saving your PDF file to disk. So basically, once you've created it, there is a save method. So PDF object.save. There's the default file specs. So default on Windows, at least, it uses temp colon, and it's going to date and timestamp the PDF. So year-month-day, hours, minutes, seconds.pdf is the default name. And you can pass in that partial file name that I mentioned, and it will insert that. You can see there the invoice 12345 gets inserted into the middle of that. Or you can override there's a file spec property that you can, if you want to totally override the file name and not have the timestamping and so on, you just set the file spec property after you've created the PDF object, and it will just override that default behavior. Okay. So that's saving it. Normally, you don't call the save method. The only time you would really call save is if you're going to create the PDF and save it to disk, and that's all. Generally, you would probably either print it or launch it to view on the screen if you're on Windows, and both of those operations call the save method for you. So it's fairly unusual. If you want to just create the PDF and dump it on disk and that's all, you would call save. Otherwise, you would call one of the other methods, which will do the save for you. So there is a print method, prints the PDF. So this is what uses Sumatra. You have to have the Sumatra PDF installed if you want to do printing. It's the only way I've found of actually physically, from code, printing a PDF without some piece of UI popping up from the Acrobat or whatever. Sumatra is very lightweight. It's tiny, in fact. It's very fast, and it's an open source product, like I say. So the print method prints the PDF to a printer. By default, it prints it to your default printer, or you can specify the name of a Windows printer, and it will direct the output to that printer. You can also call the print dialog method, which will display Sumatra's printer selection dialog and allow the user to pick which printer to send the PDF to. And the print file method is a static method that you can use to print not the document you're working on right now, but another PDF that's already on disk. So you can just pass it a file spec of a PDF and it will just print it. And again, you can optionally specify which printer name you want to print it to. And like I said, all of those print methods, well, the first two, print and print dialog, will call save for you. So generally, you prepare the content and you're going to make a choice. Do I call print, print dialog, or save? One of those three. Displaying the PDF if you want to. Again, this is clearly this is a Windows feature, and again, you don't have to have Sumatra installed to display it, but you have to have some application associated with the PDF file extension. So if you can double click it in Explorer and it pops up, that's all this API does. It literally just launches the PDF file, and whatever Windows file association is in place will come into play, and that application will open. So the preview method previews the PDF that you're currently working on, and again, preview file goes out to the file system and previews an existing file from disk. Creating a PDF from an existing file, there's an alternate constructor or an overridden constructor that allows you to pass in a file spec of a text file. All of the other parameters are there as well, but basically what this will do is it will go out and read that text file. It pre-processes it, so it figures out what's the widest row in the text file, and then it creates the PDF with that number of columns and reads the file and adds the data into the PDF, basically. It also has some support for, I look for things like tabs and turn them into spaces, and I look for form feeds and throw new pages and stuff like that. So if you have got some of those simple formatting in the text file, it should propagate some of that stuff. That if you find you've got other special characters in there that it's not dealing with, that's certainly feedback I'd be interested in receiving. But it seems to do a fairly good job of just loading the file and making a PDF of it. Write-S style processing, here's an example of that. So again, as we saw earlier, you can use the draw text RC row column method with the passing true to the new line parameter, and that's essentially like a write-S. So rather than loading up the file, if you want to control it yourself, then you're reading some data file and doing a draw text passing new line is true, and that just next line, next line, next line. Oh, I've hit the bottom, throws a new page automatically, that kind of stuff. So that's a good approach for converting existing report programs. Take out the write-S to the text file and make it a draw text RC with a new line, and just send the print output to a PDF directly, rather than having the interim text file. So let's look at some very basic demos. All I'm going to do for demos is just demonstrate with the sample programs that come with the API. Here we go. So when you unzip the API, you get a whole directory structure. There's a Windows directory with Workbench projects. There's a Unix directory. There's a VMS directory with build command procedures and so on. So I just went into the Windows directory. There's also a .NET directory with a Visual Studio solution. This all works in Synergy.NET as well. And I just opened the Workbench project example here. And basically in the sample project, you've got two things. There is an ELB here. The ELB, as you can see, just has the PDF DB. Can you read that? Is that big enough for you? Has the PDF DBL code and the SynPSG PDF code. And literally, we just build that into an ELB. And this second project has a bunch of test programs that link against that ELB. Let's just look at a couple of real simple ones. So let's start off with something really simple, HaruPDF. As you can see, I've redirected the output so I know where it's going to go in this particular. The output folder is within this demo folder, so they all go in the same place. But you can see I'm just declaring a PDF variable. I'm doing a new PDF file and specifying where the output directory is. Everything else defaults, so it's letter size, portrait mode, and so on. I'm determining what the file name will be because I don't want the date timestamp in this case, so I've just overridden that behavior. I've said I want page layout.single. That is a request to the browser to, when I open it in Acrobat, you're asking Acrobat to show you the full page, not the width view. Not all readers honor that, but some do. And then I'm just doing a draw text RC. So it defaults to row 1, column 1 in row column mode, and it just outputs the text. And then I call pdf.preview, which saves it and launches it. So that's about as simple as it gets. So if we run this application and select HaruPDF, then there's our PDF that we just created. Very simple. Okay. Slightly more complex example. Let's look at an example of attaching a file. So where is that? Attach file test. As you can see, I'm just creating a new PDF and I'm basically specifying, please attach this text file and put the output in this location. Again, I'm overriding the page, the file name, and calling preview. That's it. So it just loads up the existing text file. Let's run attach file test, and there's the result. As you can see, we've got a 76-page document that was the output of an existing print program, and we've just literally attached it to a PDF now. Okay. And the third one I'll show you right now is the write-s processing. So it's sort of an example of modifying an existing program. So here's a write-s mode test. Again, we create the PDF file document, determine its layout. I'm opening the release notes for DBL and basically just read-s'ing through the file and draw text RC with new line true. And remember, it will calculate the page size and throw new pages when it needs to and so on. And again, we just call the preview method. So that would be number 3. So there's the result of doing that. Okay, real simple. So you can get up and running to convert simple text reports really, really easily. Literally just a few lines of code, and you should be able to get up and running creating PDFs. Okay, and let's talk about some other stuff. Working with headers and footers, if you want to have page headers and page footers, then you just specify the number of header rows, the number of footer rows, or you don't have to have both when you create the PDF file, and that creates some arrayed, or that sizes some arrayed properties. So you then work with pdf.headerText 1 and 2 because I requested 2 headers. You set pdf.footerText 1 and 2 because I requested 2 footers, and every time you throw a new page, it will add that text onto the page. Okay, simple as that. I do support some token replacement in there, so you can use month, day, year, or day, month, year, and it will replace that with the current date. I support hours and minutes, it will replace that with the current time. You can say line, and it will draw a line across that header row, page number, file name, and location. So if you put those things in the header footer, it will do text replacement as it's outputting the file. Alternate headers and footers. Sometimes you find that if you're doing something, a PDF file, you don't have to have all pages in the same orientation. You can have page 1, 2, and 3 in portrait, and then switch to landscape and back to portrait, and so on. So the alternate headers can, if you need them to, come into play if you switch from the default orientation. The alternate headers and footers, if specified, will be used instead of the regular ones. So you can have some of the headers be 80 wide and some of them be 132 wide, depending on the orientation of the page. Drawing lines, if you want to do some graphics, there are a couple of ways of drawing lines. There is the draw line RC, so that's row and column based. You give it a from and to row and column, and it figures out the center of those boxes essentially and draws a line between them. Or you can use draw line, which is XY based. So that's actual, this point to this point pixel based. There's also draw line row, which just draws a line across the current row, or from the current cursor position to the end of the line, basically. So it's a simple way of just drawing a line across if you're doing write-s type processing. Also, you can draw boxes. Again, there's a row column based mechanism, and there is an XY based mechanism, and you give it the origin, destination that define the top, opposite corners of the box. It doesn't actually matter which they are. And it will just literally draw across and down between those two positions. And all of these things, you'll notice that you can define stroke color is the line color, fill color is will fill the box if specified, whether to fill the box. By default, it doesn't. So you could specify fill as true and a fill color as PDF color.red kind of thing. So I think it's a fairly intuitive API. Also recently, this wasn't in the earlier versions, but I added this a few weeks ago. You can now draw circles. So again, similar API. I haven't done a row column based one of this, it's just XY based. You define the center point and the radius, and again, you can define the line width and the fill color if you wish. So nice and simple API to use there. And also, of course, you can add images to the PDF file. So images, the API supports JPEG or PNG, and you can position those via XY coordinates, again, of the bottom left corner of the image, and so on. You've got to be a little bit careful with images, because remember that the PDF, pixels in the PDF world are not the same as pixels in the image world. A pixel in PDF is 1/72 of an inch. Okay, so if your image is based on 300 dpi, then it's going to be, you know, 4 times the size you expect it to be. So for that reason, you can override the height and width. By default, it will just assume that pixels and device-independent pixels are the same thing. So if your image is 72 dpi, which a lot are because that's the perfect resolution or density for using on the web, then everything will be fine. It will print the size you expect. But if it's a 200, 300 dpi image, they're going to be way bigger, and you would use the height and width to constrain that down again, basically. Okay. Auto items is another concept that I came up with, thinking about, well, if I'm doing some kind of multi-page report, it's likely that I might want to do the same thing on every page, beyond headers and footers. You know, I might want to draw boxes and lines and columns and all that kind of stuff. So auto items are items that are automatically added to every page as the new page is created. So you can create auto text, auto lines, auto boxes, auto images. And like I say, you define an auto box with its height and position and line width and color, and every time a page is created, that box is drawn on the page. So you literally just define the things that you want on every page, and it will do that for you. There is an option, by default, it adds auto items after you've processed the page. So you'll draw your text, and then it will draw the boxes and things over the top. Sometimes you need to, you know, if you're trying to layer things on top of each other, sometimes you might want it to draw the boxes and then you draw text on top of the box, for example. So you can optionally specify that it's drawn at the beginning of the page, not the end. I forget how you do that now, but I think there's a property that specifies when it's added. I can't remember exactly. I've also got some fundamental support for document outlines. The outline is the sort of hierarchical table of contents kind of thing that you can get displayed. Outline is essentially a bookmark item. So the default behavior is I enable outlines by default, and I add a page 1, page 2, page 3 item, so you've got some basic navigation. You can override what that text is, and they are, yes, if you want to do that, if you want to disable that, you need to do so before you add any content to the document. So it's one of the first things you should do. So you can specify the outline root text, and you can also specify it when you call new page. So if you manually call new page, you can specify what the outline is. Right now, the outlines are only at the page level. I'm planning, probably the next thing I'll do with the API is give you ways of attaching outlines to a piece of text or an image or something else. Right now, it's just at the page level. Although you can do other things yourself, because you can drop down to the PDF DBL code and do it that way as well. But I will take care of that fairly soon. Adding new pages, you call the new page method. It will default to whatever the default orientation is when you created the document, or you can override it and say add a landscape page. And you can specify the outline text for that page currently on the new page method. Couple more demos, so let's show you some of that stuff. I'm not going to go through these in a lot of detail, but quickly let's look at mixed page orientation. So if we go over here, again, I'm rushing through these because all of this stuff is available in the download, and you can play with it yourself. So this is an example of mixed page orientation. As you can see, we're creating a PDF file. I am setting its file name. I'm saying I want single layout mode. I'm saying page mode is page mode.outline, outline root text. So that's the sort of the top of the outline, what the text will say. And then I'm doing a new page and specifying the outline of portrait page, drawing some text, throwing another new page, telling it to override the default and go into landscape, and then finally adding another portrait page and then calling preview. So if we run that, mixed page orientation is number 11, and there's our PDF. You can see we got our root, which is essentially anchored to the first page as well, and then portrait page, landscape page, portrait page, and so on. Okay. The second one is a quick demo of auto items. So autoitems.dbl, we're creating the PDF file, setting header and footer text in this case. So header line 1 this is header text, and then we draw a line across line 2, a line across the first footer, and then this is footer text and the page number and so on. And then I'm adding some auto items. So autoitems.add new auto text row column. So every page will have that text on it. Every page will have this line, these boxes, this text, and so on. And then I'm just throwing 3 new pages to highlight that those auto items get added to each page. So if we run that, auto items test is number 4. And there's our 3-page document, as you can see. And sure enough, those items are on each of the pages. And all we did was say new page. Okay. Finally, let's do an example of a kind of typical report. So let's look at this one, the DBL messages report. So this is an example of a file where we're creating the file, and now I'm saying I'd like it to be landscape and I want 132 columns available, please. 2 headers, 2 footers. So I've asked for the headers and footers, so I configure, there's the header text. I'm putting Synergy message file report in the header and page and the page number in the second footer line. And then I'm going to format the report to look something like this. So I'm using auto boxes and auto text and auto lines to draw, the boxes and columns and so forth on the page. So they'll get added to every page. I'm telling it to start on row 4 because I've got a line and some header text and another line, and my data starts on row 4, and then I'm counting how many rows I'm outputting based on the page height. I'm doing a for each with a select to read DBL syntax, and formatting a print line, and doing a draw text RC, and counting rows and throwing a new page when I need to and resetting to row 4. So fairly similar to the way a lot of your print programs will work. And if we go ahead and run that one, that is number 6. So there's our DBL messages report. So the boxes, the header text, the header and footer text are coming from the auto items and header and footer, and then we're just write-testing the data into each of those items. Okay, I think I've got this program running several times, so let me just kill that off. All right, almost there. Using alternate fonts, obviously everything we've seen so far has just been Courier, which is the default PDF font. The PDF specification has several fonts that are built in. So Courier, Courier Bold, Courier Oblique, Courier Bold Oblique, italic essentially. Same with Helvetica, same with Times Roman, and then there's symbol and Zapfdingbacks with the various symbols that you can use in there. Those are all of the fonts that are built into the PDF specification itself. So what that means is you can use those fonts without the overhead of embedding the font in the document, because every PDF viewer has to deliver these fonts itself. So if you stick to those fonts, your PDF files are significantly smaller and don't ship any fonts. But if you want to, and the way you can switch the font is you can call the select font method, pass the name, Courier-Bold, pass the point size, and that basically switches the default font that's being used at that point in time. If you want to load other fonts, TrueType fonts essentially, then the API does have support for TrueType fonts with a TTF file extension. You basically use the load TrueType font mechanism and specify the path to the file. They're all normally all the Windows ones are in Windows fonts, and you can export them from there and ship them with your app if you want to do it that way. So you basically give it a file spec. I think it supports Synergy style logicals, so you can set up a fonts colon and refer to them that way. So you load TrueType font, and that returns the name of the font as a string, and then you use select font based on the name that load TrueType font comes back with, and that switches to it. So basically you can load up as many fonts as you want to use. If you do load TrueType fonts, they get embedded in your document, so the document will get bigger by the size of that font. And some fonts are obviously licensed, so there might be licensing implications as well. If you do move fonts around, exporting TrueType fonts from Windows and copying them over to use on VMS and stuff like that, then it's important that you copy them around with binary FTP. Other mechanisms, including dropping them onto Windows file shares through Samba and stuff like that, does not result in the correct format on VMS. You must binary FTP them around. I also recently added some simple support. This is kind of experimental right now, but I'm looking for feedback. Simple support for doing charting. So I've added some basic abilities to do bar charts and pie charts. It's a little bit simple right now. I've got a lot of plans, but not a lot of time. So right now this is in CodeExchange. I'm thinking of maybe taking it out of CodeExchange and putting it on GitHub and asking for other people to get involved in this. Because I think there's an opportunity there for us all to really make this thing sing and dance. So currently I've got support for pie charts and bar charts. It does support multi-series bar charts as well, and there's all kinds of other kinds of charts we could make it do. It's just a matter of time. Defining chart data, there's a chart item class that represents an item of data. There's a chart series class that represents a series of data for a multi-series chart data sets, and so on. So basically these other classes that you create a collection of chart items or a chart series and pass it to the appropriate method, and it draws the thing. So there's a very simple example of drawing a single series chart. You can see I've created a chart data set, one data series, 4 items in the series, and then I populate it, chart data series, 1 items, 2, 3, 4, and hand it chart items. The chart item has a value, a label, and a color. And then we pass it, basically once we've configured the data, there's an example for a multi-series. So again, here I've just said I want two series of data with 4 items each, and so on. So I've given now the series has a group label that describes what that series of data is, and then colors and values and so on. There's also support for drawing legends as well. There's a draw chart legend method that draws this kind of simple little legend down there. So there's an example of bar charts. There's a draw bar chart method. Again, you define the top and bottom corners of the area the way you want to draw the chart. You can optionally elect to have a little bit of space between groups if you're doing a multi-series, and pass it a chart data object, and off it goes and draws it. And obviously you can override the background color as well if you wish. Fairly simple. I know this is very simple. This could be taken an awful lot further, but hopefully it's useful. And if nothing, this is source code stuff, so you can take this and do your own stuff. I'd rather maybe get a team, rather than having you all modify the heck out of it your own way. I'd rather get some kind of group thing going if we can. Pie charts are similar. You specify a center point and a radius and hand it a chart data set, and it will just draw the pie chart for you. Chart legends, there's a draw single series chart legend method and a draw multi-series chart legend method, depending on what it is you're wanting to achieve. And some final demos. Let's just show you 3 more. Let's look at a pie chart, a bar chart, and then something a little bit more complex. So let's look at here's an example of a pie chart. So we literally just said new PDF file, again, set the name, draw text to just put some the heading text out there, and then I've defined slices is a chart data set, 1 series, 4 items, populate the data, and then pdf.draw pie chart, passing in colors, locations, and so on, and passing in the data set, and that draws the chart, and then drawing the chart legend below it and previewing it. So if we run that one, that would be the pie chart test, which is 14. And there's our pie chart being drawn. Okay, and the multi-series example is very similar, I think. Multi-series bar chart, same thing, just creating the PDF file, creating a chart data set with 2 series, 12 items per series, some for loops going on here, populating the data series and so on, and then pdf.draw bar chart row column. So from row 8, column 1, 33 wide, high and wide, sorry, and then passing in the chart data and the colors and so on. So again, if we were to run that one, bar chart, 2 series, number 16. So there's that PDF. And finally, this is where the whole thing started actually. This was the very first PDF I actually created working on an actual live customer project, using it a little bit more realistically. There's a lot of code in this example, but what this example has is there's a subroutine called test delivery ticket, which is just my test code. And as you can see, what it's doing is I've got this xcall delivery ticket, and I pass it in a structure of ticket data, an array of ticket items, an array of hazmat information, and an analysis data record, and it has all the code to make the PDF file. It puts various headings out there, it draws boxes, it does shading and background colors and so on. And then there's a bunch of code at the bottom that actually outputs all the data into the page and has for loops for the items and so on. So the application can just xcall delivery ticket and pass in the data, and this subroutine makes the PDF. I'm not going to go through the code in detail, there's hundreds of lines of code here, but let's just show you what the output looks like. And that would be number 7. And there's an example of creating that kind of document from the application. So this is kind of a hybrid mixture of, you can see I'm still using Courier in some cases for the text, but doing a lot of drawing and shading and so on. Okay, I think that's about all I had. Let's take a quick peek here. So yeah, as always, some recommended reading. So recommended reading, writing code that nobody else can read. Excellent, good way of protecting your job. Comes back to the resume thing as well, of course. And I'd strongly recommend trying stuff until it works. There you go. All right, these were just I stumbled across these on some website a little while ago and I thought they were funny. Seriously, any questions about the PDF API?
Is there any facility or support for a PDF underlay, basically, where you can load an existing PDF, bring it in, and then write your stuff over the top and save it as a combined PDF?
No, there isn't, but that's a very good point. I had a conversation with, I forget who it was, but recently had a conversation with someone who'd done exactly that, and it was pretty cool. So I'm thinking of how that might work. I'm not sure what the best mechanism is yet. I think the customer I was talking to had used Word as a mechanism, and then they'd written some software to read the Word document and make it a template, essentially, and then overlay data onto the top of it. So no, I don't have any support for that right now, but it's definitely an area that I want to figure out how to do that. Like I say, I think I'm probably going to take this out of CodeExchange and put it in GitHub and ask, give you guys the opportunity to get involved with this, because I don't have a lot of time to work on this kind of stuff right now. Any other questions?
The Sumatra, is that just a separate install? So it runs and then you just talk to it?
It's a tiny little install. It takes like half a second or something. It's really, really lightweight. But yes, it's a setup that you run. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.